Hey there, it's Sandy McIver here. Welcome back. I have a new card for you today created with new products from Syberia Designs. We're playing with the Trendy patterns. This is a layering stencil. There's a diagram on the package. You have to take the stencils out, and there's 3 stencils. So we will be doing that as our background in 3 different colors. We're going to use the Chic Rose layering die set, and we're going to use the large dies to create our rose and our leaves, and then the smile sentiment. I'm going to be using the Waffle Flower Grip Mat. I love this thing, especially for stenciling. I've laid down a piece of white Hammermill 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and that's going to end up being my card front. I'm starting with the first stencil, which has kind of the diamonds on it. There is a marking on the stencils in the top left-hand corner telling you stencil 1, stencil 2, stencil 3, and you see me push down the side of the stencil. That holds it to the grip mat and means that I don't have to use any tape to hold any of this down. It's all being held by the mat, which is really awesome. I got 3 inks today. They're Pawsitively saturated from Simon Says Stamps, SEAFOAM, which I'm starting with, and then the darker blue is Ocean, and the pink is Sweets. So I'm using a large blending brush, and I am adding the ink, going in both directions to make sure I get all the little nooks and crannies, and just trying to keep as even as possible while I disperse the ink through the stencil. And the other thing I like about this mat is once you get this side done, you can flip it around and go the other way if you want. I hate having to reach all the way to the end of stuff sometimes, even when you're trying to line things up or watch things. It's much easier to turn it around so it's right underneath your eyes and it's easier to see. And then that way you can see if you missed any of the corners in the stencil as well. Just a tip there. Okay, so we're just about finished this light blue. Again, this was SEAFOAM. I'm peeling off that stencil, and I'm going to put the second one on. And this is the larger of the squares, stencil number 2. And I had it the wrong way around. It doesn't have the little corner marks for 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, but if you look through the stencil at what you've already stenciled, it's pretty easy to line it up. Okay, so I start with a small brush, and it was working okay, but it was a little time consuming. So I'm going to flip over. You can use the larger brush again for this, and you can get a lot more area covered. Okay, and I have this sped off, obviously. Just getting through, getting all of the dark blue squares done. Well, I guess in this case they're diamonds because they're on tip. Okay. And when you get down to the end, you kind of run out of room for your fingers. So, there you go. I'm using a piece of cardstock to keep my fingers clean, and I flipped it so that I could use the other end. And of course, I'm standing almost right over this for the video. Okay, so that's done. We're peeling that off. Those are our 2 colors, very pretty together. Now we're going to add a hot pink. We're going bright and wild today. Okay, so again, pretty easy to line these up. Kind of look at the white spots and then press the stencil down so that the grip mat holds it in place for you. And this time I am going to use a small brush because these are the little tiny diamonds. And again, go in both directions so that you get all the little corners. And I kind of used 1 dab out of the ink pad for each diamond to make sure I had good saturation. And that kind of finishes up our background. There's nothing more to do to that other than to add it to a card base, which we will do in a little while. I'm going to set that aside, and we're going to work on a different part of the card. Next step, we're going to die cut our flower, and we're going to use the large rose at the top of the package of the Chic Roses. And as you can see, I have them all taped down. Starting with purple and moving to pinks for the flowers, and then a light and a kind of dark blue teal green. And here they are all cut out, and I'm going to just use our 2 blue ink pads and add a little bit of ink around the edge just to add a little bit of depth to them. So I'm using the SEAFOAM ink on the light leaves and then the Ocean on the darker ones. And these are all basil cardstock. I really like the colors, and they went well with the background. Okay, so just flipping through, adding a little bit onto the edges. And I'm not going to do the flowers because the flowers have got a cut-in detail in the edges of them anyway. So they've got some added interest. So no need to add more. Okay, we're going to put our card together. I've got a 4 1/4 by 11 score at 5 1/2 card base done in white Hammermill. I'm adding some tape to that card front that we stenciled, and I'm going to add that to the front of the card. I like to use the corner of my score buddy. That keeps everything nice and even. And then if you have a little overhang, that often happens when you do this, snip it off with a nice long pair of scissors. And I do one layer at a time. I find it easier and you get a nicer cut. So then close the card completely and do the second cut. Okay, so that puts that out of the way. Next, we're going to work on the sentiment. And this is called the Large Smile. And I cut it 3 times, twice in white and once in gold. And I am going to glue them all together. So I'm using the Barely Art glue with a nice fine tip. And stacking these together like this makes them nice and sturdy. And I like to do this when I do sentiments. That way they don't bend so much if they're going over lumper areas on the front of your card as well, which we will be doing in this case. The L and the E actually overlap the leaves on the right-hand side. So glue the top of one piece and then lay the next one over. And that gives you a couple of seconds before the glue sets to move it around and get it nice and straight. Add the glue again to the top of this one. And then we're going to add the gold one over top. So then we need to do the little dot for the top of the eye. And I'm just straightening this out, making sure that everything's nice and flat. Okay, so I've got my 2 little white pieces. I was wondering where my gold one went. It got stuck on my magic mat. If you've not had one of these magic mats before, you get them from scrapbook.com, and they replace the bottom cutting plate when you're die cutting, and they last like 6 times longer than one of the plastic die plates. I would highly recommend them. The other thing that is a good thing for small pieces of die cut is this Simon Says Stamps Place and Score Embellishment Wand. It has wax on that end that I'm using, and it's really easy to pick up little tiny pieces of paper when you're working on gluing die cuts together. Okay, so on to the flower. We have four pieces and then some little cutouts. And these little cutouts are kind of an overlay onto that last little piece. So you're just going to look at the little squiggle lines that have been embossed in that piece, and it will show you where to add these little squigglies to them. And I've done them in light pink. Okay. And I am just lining up the next one. Okay, and you're just going to work your way around all 4 of those little guys, adding the glue and then adding the little piece. Okay, that's the 3rd one, and then the 4th one goes right smack in the middle. All right, so that piece is done. Now we're going to turn all 4 of these pieces over, and I am going to put my pin back into my glue so that it doesn't dry out in the tip. I'm going to cut some square foams in half so that I can use half of them. I do this with all of my foam squares. That makes them last longer. I'm cheap, thrifty, whatever you want to call it. And I'm putting 3 on the back of each of the pieces, just 2 on that last one. And then I'm also going to put them on each of the leaves as well, because I want everything popped up so that it's not laying flat on that pretty stenciled background that we created. Adding a little bit of depth of field just, I don't know, adds to it. Okay, so I think I got most of my pieces. Then you're going to remove the protective covers from the back of your little foams, and you're going to start stacking your flower. And there is no rhyme or reason to it. You just stack them. Okay. And you could do them in 5 different colors if you wanted to. Those middle 2 I did in the same color pink because I ran out of the different shades from going from light to dark. Okay, so then the final step is gluing this to the card, and it goes kind of center up a little bit from the center. And now I'm just auditioning where my darker leaves are going to go. And whoop, adding that. Yep, I like that there. Okay, so that's going to be glued down. And then I'm going to put this dark green one over top. So there's layering leaves there. Going to do the same thing with the other side, but in the reverse. I'm going to put the green leaves down first, and then the lighter leaf is going to be a bit of an overlay on the one leaf on the left-hand side. Just tucking it under there. All right, we're ready to add the sentiment. So tweezers are an awesome deal right here. And these are reverse tweezers, so I don't have to hold them closed. You actually have to squeeze them to open them. But I like using them when I'm doing this gluing because it keeps the glue off my fingers. So then I'm going to position that at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to add a dab of glue for the dot for the eye. And then I'm taking a couple of acrylic handles and laying it over top till they dry. My final step is I'm going to add a few sequins. These are Stay Gold sequins from Simon Says Stamps, and they match the matte gold foil that I used on the sentiment. And I'm just adding 3 to the top because I want to pull that gold up into the top part of the card, and that's a nice easy way of doing it. So again, just using my Barely Art glue and my little wand with the wax end to add those, and we're done. Pretty card, no coloring, just die cutting, and a little bit of stenciling. The edge of each of the flower panels has a little cutout in it, so you can pull them up for a ruffled edge if you want to, for each of the layers. I just did the top one, and that's it. Everything I used today is listed underneath this video in the comments. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving us a thumbs up. And until next time, toodles!